Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Jake, the bull, Carter ruled the Iron Spirit gym like a lion over his territory. The sweat, the shouts, the thump of gloves on bags, it all seemed to dance to his rhythm. Every morning, before the sun even rose over Denver, he was already there, smashing the heavy bag with his fists as if punishing the entire world for daring to doubt him. 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle, carved by the weights and discipline of former Marines. Military tattoos ran down his arms like scars from a past he didn't hide. He wasn't just physically strong. Jake had raw charisma. He spoke loudly, joked arrogantly, and when he entered the room, everyone stepped aside. Not out of respect, out of fear. He had made a name for himself in the amateur circuit, racking up knockout after knockout, breaking noses, jaws, egos. His nickname, the Bull, he had deserved it. He charged without restraint, crushed without mercy. He despised the weak. He even despised the strong. In fact, he despised everyone except himself. That morning, he had just finished a sparring session where his partner had ended up breathless, leaning against the wall, his ribs aching. Jake had simply shrugged. "Coach, bring me someone real. I need an opponent who makes me sweat a little." Coach Marcus Green, a legendary figure and veteran of the 1980s, remained calm. He watched Jake with the eyes of someone who had seen dozens like him. Arrogant, brilliant, blinded. "Your opponent is coming. Be patient," he answered slowly. Jake huffed, amused. He shot a mocking look at those around him. A murmur rose in the room, like an electric current. Even the dumbbells stopped clattering. Something was brewing. Then the doors to the room opened, and silence fell. Not a loud, mocking silence. A dense silence, charged with a strange foreboding. She entered. Small, quiet, invisible almost. She carried a worn gym bag, patched at the strap. Her leggings were faded from washing. Her shoes weren't new. She wore no outward signs of power. No sponsors. No team. No entrance music. No showmanship. Just her. She moved forward with controlled slowness. Each step seemed measured, rooted. Not out of fear. Out of discipline. A black woman in her late 30s, with skin slightly marked by time, struggles, or hardship. Hard to tell. Her eyes, on the other hand, were deeply awake. Clear. Anchored. She looked at the world without blinking. Sun-Nam. Avery Brooks. Jake stared at her and burst out laughing. "Is this a hidden camera, or what? Coach, did you really bring my grandma to warm me up?" A few laughs followed from the room, but not all of them. Some smiled instinctively. Others remained frozen, worried. There was something in the air. Something abnormal. A tension that could not be explained. Coach Marcus came down the office steps, approached Avery, and shook his hand with almost solemn gravity. "Welcome home." It was not just a polite formula. It was a recognition. Jake frowned. He didn't understand. He saw a little woman, modest, coming from nowhere, walking around as if the world belonged to her. He saw a coach he respected, treating her with reverence. But he didn't see what she really was. He didn't see the legend she had been. He didn't see the years of fighting in the shadows, the broken bones, the silent victories. He didn't see the loneliness, the abandonment of the spotlight, the nights spent training while others slept. He didn't see that this woman was stronger than him, not in muscle, but in will, in controlled pain, in calm forged by fire. Jake was still smiling, but he didn't know he had just met the one who would pulverize his ego. Before becoming an anonymous figure in a room full of suitors, Avery Brooks had another name, the Shadow Wolf, a nickname born in Japanese rings, forged in the sweat of Korean dojos, and etched in the ice of Russian arenas. She was a fighter who didn't speak. She stalked her opponents in silence, reading their moves before they existed, and struck where it hurt, where it shattered certainties. She wasn't spectacular. She was clinical, fierce, methodical. In mixed martial arts circles, she was respected with fear, not for her shouts, not for her entrances, but for her absolute calm, her fixed gaze, and her way of transforming the cage into a temple. Then one day she was gone, without defeat, without scandal, without goodbye. The public had speculated, injury, depression, banishment, but the truth was much simpler, and much harsher. His mother, the woman who had taught him everything, silence, discipline, resilience, had fallen seriously ill. And Avery, despite the fame, despite the contracts, had given up everything. The world had forgotten her, of course. That's how it is. The arena doesn't mourn those who leave it. But she never stopped. Never stopped training, alone, at dawn, in the basement of an old house in Aurora. Never stopped doing his push-ups while his mother slept. Never stopped hitting bags hanging from rusty beams, repeating mental sequences between two distributions of medicine, between two moments of doubt, of fatigue, of collapse. 10 years. 10 years of absence. 10 years of invisibility. And today, she was there. Not for revenge. Not to win back a belt. But to prove that silence does not erase greatness. That pain does not extinguish mastery. And that humility is sometimes the most powerful mask of strength. In the ring, Jake, the bull, Carter was warming up, a carnivorous smile on his lips. He was in his kingdom, surrounded by knowing glances and easy mockery. He puffed out his chest, raised his arms, and flaunted his peacock figure. Take care of your face, princess. I'll try not to damage it too much. Laughs. Avery, however, didn't respond. She entered the ring with almost ceremonial slowness. She bowed respectfully to Coach Marcus, then to Jake, an ancient gesture forgotten by this generation. Not a word. Her face was impassive, her breathing steady, like a calm sea before a surgical storm. The bell is sleeping. Jake charged forward, as always, like a bull. But the bull had already lost. Avery dodged, fluid, elastic, as if time slowed down for her. A sidestep, a pivot, a backslide. Jake punched the air. Twice. 3 times. He frowned. Then everything happened very quickly. An almost imperceptible movement. She hooked her left arm, spun around, used her own momentum, and Jake flew away. Literally. He landed heavily on the ring floor, his eyes wide. Around, a breath of astonishment. He stood up, red with shame and rage. He attacked again, this time with more violence. Uppercuts, hooks, attempts at crushing. He put everything he had into it. All his power, all his fury. Avery, on the other hand, didn't even blink. She blocked, slipped, recovered, and disarmed. Then, with almost dancing fluidity, she knocked her opponent down again, this time with a throw from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of school perfection. Jake found himself on the ground a second time, gasping, confused. The laughter was gone. The entire room was frozen. An almost sacred tension. The phones began to rise, slowly, like arms in a theater. Because right there, before their eyes, it wasn't a stroke of luck. It was a demonstration. A lesson. A stark reminder. Never underestimate someone who has known silence, pain, and discipline. And above all, never a woman who comes back from the shadows. Jake was panting. Sweat was pouring down his forehead, his muscles burning like never before. Never. And he knew it. Had he ever been dominated like this? He took a step back, his eyes searching to understand, to find a flaw, a moment of hesitation in this woman. But she remained there, motionless, posed like an obsidian statue, calm, impassive, almost too silent in this tumult. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't shout. She didn't hit with rage. She simply dominated. She looked at him, not with disdain, nor contempt, nor anger, just with an implacable calm, a calm laden with stories, pain, and years spent in the shadows. Then, in a low voice, almost a whisper barely audible in the middle of the room, she said, "You fight with muscle. I fight with history." The words were simple, yet they struck Jake's head like a gong. He felt his arrogance waver, his confidence shaken. He let his guard down for a moment. And in that silence, in that look that he thought was small and weak, he finally understood. It wasn't a fight. It was not a game of strength and power. It was a lesson in humility, mastery, and respect. The final gong sounded, and Avery, without another word, bowed. She left the ring with the same serenity she had when she entered. She picked up her worn bag, her simple leggings, her lack of shine. She walked towards the exit. But this time, it was no longer the unknown woman who had been mocked at the beginning. The young people in the room followed her with their eyes, fascinated, silent, as if witnessing a legend that had just been reborn. Jake stood there, motionless. His fist slammed against the ring ropes, producing a dull thud, almost like a burst of rage mixed with budding respect. He went down. Then he ran towards her, still out of breath. Attends. She turned around slowly. His eyes betrayed neither surprise nor defiance. Jake stopped in front of her, his words simple, stripped of arrogance, full of rare honesty. I want to learn. I want you to train me. A suspended moment. The weight of years of absence, of silences, and of past struggles hovered between them. Then Avery nodded slowly. So get ready to listen. And forget your ego. At that precise moment, the entire room understood that something had just changed, not only between these two fighters, but in the heart of each of the witnesses. Because sometimes the biggest fight isn't the one against an opponent. It is the one we wage against ourselves. A few months had passed since this fight, which was not one. The Iron Spirit Room, once dominated by noise, sweat, and displays of ego, had changed. It wasn't a visible revolution. Rather, a slow, patient, almost imperceptible mutation at first. A new energy, a new rigor, a new order. And at the center of that transformation was Avery Brooks. Not on a throne, not on a platform, but just there, at the time when the others still arrived tired. Already warmed up, already focused. His gestures are precise, economical, efficient. His attentive eyes, always listening. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She had become the most respected trainer in the gym. Not because she demanded admiration, but because every word she said seemed to carry the weight of 10,000 silences. Because every correction, however discreet, revealed a knowledge of combat that few had ever touched upon. She didn't train machines. She formed minds. Jake Carter was not the same. He had traded his brutality for precision, his mocking laugh for cold concentration. The arrogant look he once gave to the newcomers was now a calm, almost benevolent look. He was still strong, still fast, still imposing, but more dangerous in a completely different way. He had learned to control himself. And every time a newcomer arrived, full of muscle and confidence, Jake would give them the same sentence, like a sincere warning. You think you're strong? Wait until you face someone who had to survive silence, loss, oblivion, and still got back up. It wasn't a threat. It was a tribute. There were days when the entire room seemed to revolve around her, without her saying a word. A simple glance from Avery was enough to correct a posture. A small gesture of the finger to remind you to breathe. A frown, and the student knew he had to start again. And then there was this thing no one could explain. His presence was soothing. Even the most nervous, even the proudest. She didn't break egos. She emptied them slowly, patiently, like emptying an overfilled bowl to prepare it to receive. One winter evening, as the room emptied, Jake joined her at ringside. She was finishing a training session with a shy young boxer. He stood back, watching, fascinated. When the girl left, Avery wiped her hands and sat down on the bench. Jake walked over and, without asking, sat down next to her. A silence fell. The right silence. The one that says more than words. Jake spoke, his voice calm. You made me a different man. Avery shrugged slightly. She wasn't looking for compliments. No, you let yourself be transformed. It's different. Jake smiled. He looked at the bags swinging gently in the air, and at the figures in the distance who continued to train under his supervision. Aren't you afraid of disappearing into the shadows again? She looked at him for a moment. Then she said softly, I never needed light. I just needed every blow I dealt to serve a purpose. And Jake, in a breath, answered, You do much more than that. And somewhere, discreet, always present, Avery smiles. It wasn't a smile for her. It was for all those we had underestimated. For all those who thought that a small body means a weak mind. For all the silent legends who walk among us, without noise, but with a power that nothing can shake. She was the shadow that had learned to tame the light, and now she was bringing out the strength in others.